This week we start to get into what I refer to as the selling end. And this is where we start talking more about communication and the way we go about interacting with the customer. So this lecture is about promotion. Here's an example. I won't go through it, but you can see the video yourself and decide, is this a good piece of promotion or is this a bad piece of promotion? Meaning if a product is bad enough, there's nothing you can do. As the old saying goes, it's putting lipstick on a pig. Anyway, as a reminder, all 4 P's have to play together. And so based on how you're pricing it, the way you're distributing it, and what your product does, how you promote it. So the next few lectures, we're going to be talking about promotion, how do we shape perception and values, branding. Branding is one of the great abused words in marketing, and that's that a lot of people don't use it correctly. But what branding is about is, what is my first thing that comes to mind when I talk about a product? And so it's very closely tied to positioning. In communication, what channels do I need to touch people? And today there's a lot of media out there. So how do we go about picking what it is we want to choose? So today we're going to talk about why we do it, what is the message, how do we measure the effectiveness of that metrics, and how do we go about doing those measurements. And so going all the way back to when we talked about how do customers think. Now we're getting into the marketing influence, and that's what we use promotion for, is we want to put into the mind of the customer what are the perception of benefits, what options exist. Remember, competition is in the mind of the customer. And so if we can tell them these are your options, then guess what? They develop preferences according to what we believe them to be. And those are competitive items that we match up well with. And finally, how do we steer their choices? And so the first step is about building awareness and connecting with the customer, and how do we get them to act? And this is one of the hardest things for entrepreneurs, and that's that you're fighting status quo. In the short term, what do we use promotion for? We want to increase sales. But in the longer term, we want to build brand equity. And brand equity is that perception. And based on that perception, we can charge more. So what does awareness give us? Well, it gives us knowledge of alternatives, or we can make them get to trial. If we evaluate those alternatives in terms of valuing a brand, and then we decide, are we satisfied with it, and what actions are we going to take? And so for technology products, the critical elements in promotion today are education, because people do not understand technology. How do we simplify our options? I mean, there's so many combinations of products now. How do we simplify it? For example, if you go buy soup today, go ahead and stand in the aisle. There's low sodium, half sodium, organic, all natural, and so on and so forth. It's like there are too many options today. There are too many products. So how do I make it simple for you? Naturally, with technology, we're concerned about risk, and whether it's liability risk, cost risk, so on and so forth. How do we reduce that? And because we get overwhelmed with so much information, we become numb. How do we get over that numbness so people will act? These are the things that communication that can impact. What is its efficacy, meaning effectiveness? The perceptions, awareness, preferences, consumer behavior, and also partnerships. What do we associate this thing with? And also, basically no products exist in a volume. They exist in a space. If we go all the way back to that lecture where I talked about a window sits in a spire, it's on top of a building, and so on and so forth. Same thing also applies to these products. And so what you're trying to do in promotion is you're trying to say the right thing to the right people, the right way, at the right time, consistently over time. This is where you see the good brands. Basically, they have great consistency, or if they change very slowly so you can stay with them. It's the ones that can't do this that people just forget about because it's too confusing. And also, it's going to come across different outlets, different channels. Your objectives and actions, there are two types. There's pull marketing, and that's inbound, meaning the customers come to you. An example of that is search engine optimization. And that's that when you type into a search engine, you have told the internet, this is my intent, this is what I want to look for. And so therefore, that's why they pull you in. Push marketing is basically you go directly at customers, and that's you already know they have an interest, or it's generic. For example, food items are generic. That's why they send out coupons to grocery stores to everybody, because there are very few percentage of people who are not going to be interested in that. And so the thing you tend to see is that for startups and all, you rely on inbound marketing because you don't know who your customers are. And so it tends to favor B2C. Now for B2B, there's only so many businesses you're going to sell to, so you have a pretty good idea of who those people are. And so with B2B, you tend to go more towards push marketing. Not that pull marketing doesn't work, but if you know who the targets are, why sit around waiting for them to come to you? You go to them. And so the people are who you are targeting, your customers, your channels, your partners, and your influencers. And so you need to understand those descriptors in order to locate those people. In terms of a plan that you craft for promotion, first of all, what are your objectives? Again, your objectives aren't always financial. It could be for other reasons. Who is it that I need to talk to? What is it going to say? How often do I need to say it? If you don't do it enough, they forget about you. You do it too much, you annoy them, and then they turn you off. How are you going to measure it? And finally, spending. And this is a very, very big part of promotion. Promotion can get expensive real fast. I mean, for you as a startup, for example, I'm just going to use Facebook advertising. And it's like, wow, it's like $20 or $50 per day. Well, all of a sudden, when you have a $1,000 bill at the end just for selling on Facebook for a month, you suddenly realize, wow, for a startup where I'm just living off the land, that's actually a lot of money. The process is when you send a message to someone, first you encode it. And then the question is, what media do you use? For example, email. Email is much different than talking to somebody face-to-face. It's much different from a video. It's much different than talking on social media. And so when you encode your message, meaning sending it by email, is it just going to get lost in the inbox? Also, emails can't be too long. People lose interest. And actually, for those of you who are interested, I teach a digital marketing course where I go this into much greater detail about the rules of email and what you're trying to do. And then when you decode it, how you're going to interpret it. For example, if you use sarcasm, that's a tough thing to do in writing. Sarcasm is a lot easier when you have physical cues. And so in terms of the receiver, they respond, and based on the response, it feeds back to you. We want good messaging. And what does good messaging mean? Low clutter, supports the brand, cost efficiency, targeted, and that it connects. And that's what we mean by personalization today. If it's a personalized message, if it has something that I can relate to, then I'm much more likely to listen. And so we'll wrap up the rest of this lecture in the next video.